You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show. The preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hey, Moses Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. There are these things that makes it official. Welcome to the show. We certainly appreciate it. As always, the Chris Voss Show is the family that loves you, but we don't loan you money, but we still love you. But if you can find other members of your family loan you money, well, that's on you. Make sure you get a good contract or something. I don't know. And don't borrow money from people that have like high VIGs. Like I don't know if you have friends or your family in the mafia, but sometimes they can be bad. I'm just saying. Anyway, guys, go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss one, the TikTokity, and there's probably a hit on me now after making that statement. Anyway, guys, we have an amazing young man on the show. We're talking to him about his latest book that came out October 20th, 2023. It's called Hesed. Does the Tanakh foreshadow Jesus, the loving kindness of G-D, God? In essence, we'll talk about why it's G-D on his book. And Mark Stouffer is on the show with us today. We'll be getting into all the good stuff and knowledge and some of his writings and other books that he has. Mark is a retired engineer who lives with his family in Columbus, Ohio. He was born in 1960 and grew up loving sports. He graduated with a degree in civil engineering from Iowa State in 1983. After college, God reached out to Mark. God held Mark's heart in his hand and said, I am here. He received Jesus as Lord and Savior, and everything changed. He has a passion for the Bible, which he's been studying and teaching for over 40 years, and it's been Mark's goal to learn the message that each Bible author intended, as opposed to trying to make the Bible agree with his beliefs. Out of his grace, God called Mark to write this important 4-volume series. We'll get into that. And the subject of the book was never Mark's idea. Welcome to the show, Mark. How are you?
I'm good today. Good to be here.
It's good to have you. So give us your .coms. Where can people find you on the interwebs?
Well, I have a website. It is called lovingkindnessofadonai.com. And my books are on Amazon. You can search on my name, and there aren't too many people with my name. And then maybe Hesed, Hesed, and that'll get you there. But my website is lovingkindnessofadonai.com.
There you go. So give us a 30,000 overview of what's inside your new book.
Okay. Well, so actually that you mentioned the first book, which is Hesed. Mm-hmm. So it's the first of 4 books, as you said, and the books are the premise for all 4 for the series is John 5:39, which I think is a very interesting statement that he made. He was in a debate with the religious leaders, and he said, you guys search the scriptures, and it is these that speak about me. Mm-hmm. So they didn't call it the Old Testament or the Tanakh, I don't believe, at that time. But I'm not sure about that. But they call it the Tanakh today, the Jewish people. And he was talking to their leaders, and he said, you search it. And he said, for salvation. And he said, it's all about me. So I'm writing the 4 volumes, each covering a different element of the Old Testament to see, is that really true?
Oh, wow.
Is that true what Jesus said? Was it talking about him? So that's the subject of the series. In the first book, I cover the sacrificial system and the Old Testament law. Mm-hmm. And I look to see, did that really point to what he did on the cross, or there's really not much of a connection? Oh. So I cover that, and then I cover one more element, which is I go through the lives of Joseph and Moses and David and Daniel and Cyrus, who actually was a Persian, and Isaac. Mm-hmm. And there's some really striking parallels between their lives and Jesus's life. And so we compare those passages, and then of those men, not everything in their lives, but there were key moments in their lives, key aspects of their characters that really have a strong parallel to Jesus. And so then I just asked the question to the reader, was this inserted by God in the Old Testament on purpose to foreshadow Jesus? Is it that strong? So the reader can make his own decision on that, but I present the raw passages.
There you go. And you've done a book series, or where are you at in the process there?
So the second book came out last spring, and I'm writing the third book now.
Okay.
And the second book was it's called the Mashiach,
Mm-hmm.
which is just the Hebrew spelling and pronunciation for the word Messiah.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, and it is all about the messianic prophecies
Mm-hmm.
in the Old Testament. And then we look at them and we lay them out, and then again we ask the question, how strongly did this predict what Jesus did 2,000 years ago?
There you go. So tell us a little bit about your upbringing. I kind of read some of it in the bio, but tell us kind of how you were raised and some of these influences that happened to you as you went down that road.
Yeah, so I was raised in a mainline Protestant denomination, and the one I was in, I have no need to name it. The one I was in was quite ritualistic.
Okay.
And I didn't connect to it. But I went every week growing up, and I was an altar boy for years.
Mm-hmm.
I became the head altar boy. But in the church, it was a lot of rituals. I didn't connect to it. They really didn't explain. No one explained to me Jesus and his love and God. It was just doing these things. So anyway, didn't mean that much to me. But I went to college, and I'm just an American guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
I played sports. I studied pretty hard. I had a job after school in high school, and then I went to college, and I was good at math, so I went into engineering school. Worked hard at that, and just drank beer and played football with my friends in the yard, outside of the dorm, and that's it. And I really, I was kind of a all-American kind of a guy. I didn't break any laws. I didn't do drugs. I drank plenty, but I didn't cheat. I did everything right in a way, and I didn't realize that I really wasn't that great of a guy. I kind of had an idea, I gossiped and wasn't really all that nice.
Oh,
honestly, but
yeah, we heard about it. It was in the news. No, I'm just kidding. Gossiping.
And so, and every now and then I would think about God, and I think he was knocking on my door a little in college, and I would say, "Oh God, I'm working so hard to, in these engineering courses, but maybe someday." And then a funny thing happened, Chris. I graduated, and I graduated after winter quarter. It took me 4 years and 2 quarters at Ohio State, and you have to rent your apartment from September to September. So I graduated in March. So I was committed to staying in my apartment for 6 more months, and the economy was really bad, and I didn't have a job. So I had told God during college, someday when I have more free time, I will consider you. And boy, I've never had so little to do in all my life. I didn't have any money. I didn't have a job. I didn't have anything to do, anywhere to go. And he came to me at that time, and it was a miracle. I don't know how he does this. I'm sure he's done this with other people, but he kind of came into my heart, and he was just there all day. And he was there, and I knew he was there. He didn't say anything. And that lasted over a week. And at that time I tried to read a Bible, and I called a pastor and went and talked to him. He was willing to come and talk to me at a church a few blocks away. And I finally didn't know how to get to heaven, and I just prayed, God, please show me. And then within a week I met somebody, graduated the same day as me, which a lot of people graduate at Ohio State. It's really big. And he was in an engineering too, but I'd never met him. And he went to a Bible believing church, and he invited me, and I turned him down at first, but he kept inviting me, and eventually I went. And then it wasn't like the church I grew up in. They taught the Bible. I'd never heard it, and I loved it. And I heard how you go to heaven through Jesus, and so I received him, and that's my story.
There you go. And so we mentioned when I was announcing the title of the book, G-D, and that's how it shows in the title of the book. Is there a reason that it's presented that way on Amazon and throughout your book and history?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So I wrote these books for Jewish people primarily.
Okay.
And to be respectful to them, I wrote it the way they do.
Okay.
Not all Jewish scholars write it that way, but a lot of them do. And they do it just because they have so much respect for God. They don't even want to write the word God. So they put a hyphen in for the vowel.
Wow. I do that when I swear, or when I go GD, I do a hyphen in there. No, I'm trying to be. I'm not sure you're being respectful if you're using the GD word. So, right. So, what was the proponent? So you go live your life. You've been a civil engineer. When did you finally make the decision where you needed to write the books?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've been going to church and playing various roles of service all these years, and the thing that I always enjoyed reading the Bible. Some things come easier to each of us, and some things harder. Praying, I wasn't great at. I would always go, I'll pray, but I have to pay this bill first, but with the Bible, you know what I'm talking about.
I do that.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm just gonna strip one more night at Thunder Down Under, and then I just need to pay this one bill, and then I'll get religion. And I've been doing that for 16 years or something. No one believes that story.
Well, so but I was always easy for me to read the Bible, and so I've been reading the Bible and studying it for 40 years.
Oh wow!
And I actually wrote a book many years ago, but it wasn't that great. But it was good because I learned how to write a book, and I got some feedback. I put all my effort into the research, and it was very interesting to me, but I didn't write it very well. I didn't write it for the reader, and it wasn't interesting to read. So. But anyway, I'm like, okay, well, that was a lot of work, and I'm not sure God's calling me to do that, so I didn't write anymore. And then 4 or 5 years ago, I felt like I wanted to write something, and I actually wanted to write to Muslim people, and that's a whole story. I've studied the Quran quite a bit, but in the middle of the night, I woke up and I had all these thoughts in my head. And I knew something was going on, and I got up. It was 3 a.m, and I got up and typed it all out, and it took like 40 minutes. And it was a whole chapter in a book, but it wasn't to Muslims. It was to Jewish people. And in that moment, and ever since, I felt called by God to write this. And I just feel, I just want to give God praise because, as I said, I was not the greatest guy, and I wasn't. And, throughout my Christian life, I don't claim to be the nicest guy, the salt of the earth guy. I'm impatient, and various other things. And I have some qualities, but it's just out of God's grace. I mean, I loved reading the Bible, and I just felt like that's who God is. He's like, he just loves me as his son, regardless that I'm not the best follower of Jesus. And he's just like, Mark, you want to write something, and you just love reading the Bible? I have something for you. And he gave it to me. And so I just thank you, God. That's all I could say. It's been a joy.
There you go. You've written this is the first book that we're featuring here. And then what's the name of the second one? Let's get a plug in for that.
Yeah, the name of the second one is The Mashiach. And it's all about the prophecy.
Okay. Now, which prophecy? Do you want to expand a little on that?
I did, as I was preparing for the show, I wrote a few things down. And, In my the final chapter of that book, I titled that chapter "Puzzle Pieces" because I feel like there's a lot of messianic prophecies, and they're about both comings.
Mhm.
There's about this hero coming at the end of human history to set everything right, the Messiah. But there's also these other prophecies, and I felt like that they fit together like puzzle pieces. And so you can look at one and go, "My goodness, that's something." But then when you put 3 or 4 of them together, a picture emerges. And so I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I'll rattle off just a few prophecies.
Please.
So the famous one is Isaiah 53, about a servant who dies on behalf for the sake of, like a lamb, like a sacrificial lamb, for the sake of other people's sins.
Mhm.
And if you read Isaiah 53 and you're not a Christian or you're not a Jew and you don't know that much about the Bible, if you read Isaiah 53, which was written around 700 years before Jesus, if someone reads that to you and doesn't say this is Isaiah 53, you'll go, "That's Jesus. It's exactly him. And it's about his death. And it's about him dying for the sake of the sins of others." In verse 5, it says that this servant will be pierced for our transgressions. And that's a quote.
Oh, wow.
Now, in Psalm 22, that's famous. That's a psalm written by David 1,000 years before Jesus. And no one knew what that was about. But once they started crucifying people and the Jews learned what crucifixion was, because it would be hundreds of years after David wrote this when they knew what crucifixion was, then immediately everyone said, "Well, that's about crucifixion." Well, who is this person? And it's about one special person. And in verse 16, it says that this person will, he's speaking, the victim, and he says, "They pierced my hands and my feet." And it's speaking metaphorically. He says, "A group of lions have pierced my hands and my feet."
Mm-hmm.
So Isaiah 53 said, "They pierced, that this person is pierced for our transgressions." So then Psalm 22 says that.
Mm-hmm.
And in Zechariah 12:10, it's about the Messiah coming at the end of the time to the Jewish people. And in 12:10, he says, I'm going to quote, "Look upon me, they have pierced me. You have pierced me." I'm not quoting it, but they look upon him and he is pierced. So the Messiah comes and he's pierced, and he appears before the Jewish people and shows them that. So these 3 verses fit together like a puzzle. So the Messiah is going to be pierced in his hands and his feet. So then when Jesus is, it's not just one prophecy where you could go, "Well, that's interesting." It's a whole bunch coming together.
Yeah.
In Daniel chapter 9, in verse, I think it's 25, it says, and I quote, "The Messiah will be cut off." And it gives a date. It gives a time. Cut off means kill. That was a idiom in Hebrew. So that's amazing. What do you mean the Messiah is going to be killed? So there's these prophecies that fit into a bucket about a conquering Messiah coming, and that's at the end of time, and that context is given. And then there's these other prophecies about the Messiah being killed and being pierced, and of course, in crucifixion, you're pierced in your hands and your feet. So anyway, I tied the prophecies together in the final chapter, which I call puzzle pieces. So those are powerful.
There you go. And so you put this all. Do you feel inspired when you're writing that the Word of God is coming through you?
Yeah. As I'm writing and as I'm reading passages, which I've, again, been reading for 40 years, sometimes the words lift off the page to me and I see the meaning in a way I never saw before, more deeply. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I never saw that." But it's not a devotional type of interpretation. I think I'm seeing what the author meant. Not like, oh, that makes me feel good because last week my neighbor's dog died and he was really hurt. And I'm not putting that down, but some people go, oh, that passage is for me. And I don't want to denigrate that, but there's also an actual literal meaning that the author meant of each passage. And that's what I'm talking about.
Okay, there you go. And that's why people study the Bible and other books like this. Is they're trying to flesh out the meaning and maybe some of the complexities of maybe what the people are referring to, and that's part of their in line with their study and stuff like that. What do you see? You now you're writing a 4-volume series, so you're writing. I think you said it, and forgive me. Book 3 or 4 you're working on right now.
Yeah, actually both of them, but I'm finishing up book 3.
And then, do you have any intent to do anything beyond that, or is it just kind of see how it works out after that?
Yeah, it's kind of see how it works out after that. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you're doing a lot. 4 books is a lot, especially when you're working on 2 or 3 at the same time. So you got your hands full there. But it sounds like it's really rewarding to you, and people are receiving it well, and they're finding it rewarded. And now, are you Jewish by birthright?
No, I'm European.
How's the Jewish people responding to it?
Well, I don't know. We've given it to, I don't actually know a lot of Jewish people, but we've given it to all the ones that we know, my wife and I, and we're praying that God gets it in the hands of the people he wants it to, he wants to read it. And actually, most Jewish people are not interested in hearing about Jesus. They're very wonderful people. They want to be our friends, real friends.
Yeah.
But they're not interested in Jesus.
Okay.
But and I know that. And so writing this book, first of all, there's only 15 plus million Jewish people in the world. So that's a small audience. And only a very small fraction of them are interested to find out who Jesus really was. So my audience is very small. But I felt called by God to do it. So I'm doing a lot of praying.
Do you think your books are, they're targeted also to people maybe of Christian faith or who want to just study this sort of thing? Maybe it's good for them too?
Yeah, that's a good question. It is good for Christians who, for whatever reason, their church doesn't teach a lot about the Old Testament. Mm-hmm. It's good for them.
Because when you grew up, that was one of the things you mentioned. You're like, hey, I don't want to. I noticed on your website, looking over, you've got several promotions where you've got reach out for pastors and church leaders, normal people to take a look at your thing. What do you do with the pastors and church leaders in getting them exposed to the book?
Well, we offer a seminar that my wife and I teach. My wife is very, very knowledgeable and a very good public speaker. And so we teach a half-day seminar. And this is just for people within driving range of Columbus. Mm-hmm. So maybe as far as Pittsburgh or Detroit. And, so in that, we teach kind of the content of these books, and we teach about the Old Testament and about, there's a lot of prophecy in the Old Testament about the end of time. And we teach a little bit about that too. Mm-hmm. And so those things, that's what we offer.
There you go. You might want to do you should guys do a TikTok channel or a YouTube. I've seen even, people doing Bible study on TikTok. It's kind of interesting to see. And I guess there's people over there that are definitely interested in it. But the great thing about that is they can spread their message a lot more wider. But, it's up to you what you want to do. Just a suggestion there. What have we talked about? Maybe they want to tease out to get people to order the books before we go.
We've done pretty good.
That's what we do.
Third book is out late in 2025, and it is the minute Adam and Eve sinned and God said, okay, I told you, you're going to die, and he cast them out of paradise into a broken world that we live in, and eventually they died. But the minute he did, as he was telling them, okay, this is really going to happen, he also gave a very cryptic hint, you could call it, about that there would be a savior that would come one day. So, I'm glad I just thought of that verse because he actually said that Satan is going to of this descendant that Eve would have one day, this savior. He said Satan is going to bruise you on the heel. So that's very interesting because we just talked about those verses of the prophecies that where you'll be pierced in your hands and feet. But anyway, he set in motion this plan, and then the plan takes shape as the Old Testament moves along, and the Jews play a huge part in that plan. And so we look at that, and the goal of that plan is one day to restore man back into God's presence, into paradise or heaven. And so we look at now, how does Jesus fit in that plan as it's laid out in the Old Testament?
Mm-hmm.
And then the fourth book, and I don't know if this will sound that great to readers, but I really like it, is I do a literary analysis of the Old Testament. Mm-hmm. And it's a very interesting because it's just like, it's a great piece of literature, great writing, and so on. And then in the first 11 chapters, all these plot lines are open. Man's kicked out of paradise, in trouble. Satan has made accusations against God's character. Mm-hmm. And then you have, I think 900 some chapters after that. And in the very last book of the Bible, which was the last book written, Malachi, it's a 4-chapter prophetic book. But part of prophecy is they were addressing real life issues of their day, as well as predicting the future and giving warnings. Mm-hmm. And they had been exiled to Babylonia, and they'd come back. 2 of the 12 tribes had come back, and but they still weren't doing well spiritually. And Malachi's like, my gosh. And in this, there's a quote from God where he says, this is shocking. He was using shock appeal. God says, I'm going to rub vomit on your faces to the priests. Can you believe that?
Well, they must have been bad.
Well, they were offering, they were. And they were offering diseased and lame, 3-legged sheep as their sacrifices.
That'll do it.
And God's like, you don't get it. It's for you that you offer sacrifices, and I'm going to bless you. But I need you to relate to me and trust me. And I'm just an afterthought to you and a problem to you, And so the book ends that way. But the point is that none of the plot lines that were open in the beginning of the book were answered by the end of the book. None of them. And so then, then what I do is I go through that, I do a literary analysis, and then I look at the message of the New Testament, and then we ask the question, does the message, the main message of the New Testament answer those plot lines? How well does it answer them? Mm-hmm. Because to me, when you read the Old Testament, you read the entire thing, or you look at the entire work, no one would end it that way. It ends on in defeat, and God of all people would not end his book that way. So it begs for a second volume. So
there you go.
That's what
you're putting them out there, and people are reading them. So give us your final pitch out for people who order the book. Tell them what .coms they can go to find out more and get to know what you're up to.
Yeah. So lovingkindness of Adonai.com. And there's just links to Amazon for my books there, but there's explanations of each book and some excerpts you can look at, or you can just go to Amazon. I have the ebooks priced very low because I'm not really writing these, maybe as you can tell, to make a fortune. I'm retired. I'm writing these because I love God, and I believe he called me to send this message out. So the ebooks are priced very low, and the paperback is priced at a normal price. So
there you go. Good stuff, man. Good stuff. Well, we certainly appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you very much, Mark, for being here.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. And order the book, folks, wherever fine books are sold. It's called Hesed, at least the first in the series, I should say. Hesed, does the Tanakh Foreshadow Jesus, The Loving Kindness of God, out on paperback and other formats, October 20th, 2023. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, linkedin.com/Chris Voss. Chris Voss, one on the TikTokity, and all those crazy places on the internet. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you